I almost turned around before she saw me. My hands were shaking, my shirt was wrinkled from spending the morning in a hospital waiting room, and the only reason I was standing outside that little cafe was because my older brother looked at me through tired, feverish eyes and whispered, "Please don't let her think I stood her up." I walked inside, found the woman waiting by the window, forced myself to smile, and quietly admitted, "My brother is sick, so I came instead." I expected disappointment, maybe even anger. Instead, she smiled with tears gathering in her eyes and answered, "Best date I've ever had." Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. For me, it wasn't graduation, my first job, or losing someone I loved. It was the moment I sat across from a stranger who had every reason to walk away and somehow chose to stay. Looking back now, I realize the story wasn't about a blind date at all. It was about two people carrying invisible wounds that neither of them expected another person to understand. My name is Nolan Mercer, and for most of my life I lived in my brother's shadow. My older brother, Everett, had always been the confident one. He could walk into any room and make friends before I even found a place to stand. He was successful, funny, handsome without trying, and somehow never made me feel smaller because of it. Instead, he spent our entire childhood pulling me into the world whenever I wanted to hide from it. When our parents died in a highway accident while I was still in college, Everett quietly became everything a family was supposed to be. He worked longer hours so I could finish school. He skipped vacations so I could afford rent. Every birthday, every holiday, every achievement I celebrated had his fingerprints on it. So when the doctors found a rare autoimmune disease attacking his body at only 35 years old, I watched the strongest man I knew slowly become someone who needed help standing from a chair. He never complained. He never asked why. He simply smiled through the pain because that was who he had always been. The blind date had been arranged by one of Everett's co-workers, who insisted he needed to start living again instead of spending every weekend either working or sitting through medical appointments. After weeks of refusing, he finally agreed. Her name was Eliza, and from everything he had been told, she was thoughtful, intelligent, and had survived enough heartbreak to appreciate honesty more than perfection. The morning of the date, Everett collapsed in his apartment kitchen. By the time I reached the hospital, doctors were running tests while nurses moved quickly around him. He kept apologizing for ruining everyone's day even as they pushed medication into his fore. When he remembered the date, he grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and begged me not to let her think he simply didn't care. I laughed nervously, asking how exactly he expected me to fix that. He smiled weakly and told me to explain everything. Just apologize. She deserved the truth. An hour later I found myself standing outside the cafe feeling completely ridiculous. She was already there. Sunlight poured through the windows, catching strands of chestnut hair resting on her shoulders as she quietly read a novel while waiting. There wasn't a trace of impatience on her face. Somehow that made everything even harder. When I introduced myself and explained who I was, embarrassment burned through every word. I expected awkward silence. Instead she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked only one question. Was he going to be okay? I admitted that nobody knew yet. She closed her book, folded her hands together, and softly suggested that since both of us had already shown up, maybe we could simply share lunch instead of letting sadness win another day. It was the strangest beginning to any friendship imaginable. We talked about everything except romance. She worked as an elementary school art teacher. I restored antique furniture in a small workshop that barely paid the bills but made me genuinely happy. She confessed she still wrote letters to her grandmother even though she had passed away years earlier because it helped her process difficult emotions. I admitted I still called Everett whenever I fixed something in my apartment because somewhere inside me I was still the younger brother who believed he could solve every problem. Hours disappeared without either of us noticing. When the waitress finally apologized because the cafe was closing for the afternoon, Eliza laughed and said she couldn't remember the last time she'd forgotten to check her phone. Before leaving, she handed me a folded piece of paper. Inside was her number. She smiled gently and told me that when my brother felt better, he should call if he still wanted coffee. Then she paused. Or if I ever needed someone to talk to while sitting in another hospital waiting room, I could call too. I walked back to the hospital feeling lighter than I had in months. Everett immediately noticed. He teased me before I even reached his bed, asking whether his replacement had embarrassed the family name. When I told him everything that happened, he stared at the ceiling for a very long time. Finally he laughed. He joked that perhaps I was better at blind dates than he was. Neither of us realized those words would eventually become impossible to forget. Over the following weeks, Everett's condition worsened before it improved. There were more hospital visits, more medications, more uncertainty than anyone deserved. During that time Eliza occasionally texted me, asking only how Everett was feeling. Sometimes our conversations lasted 5 minutes. Sometimes they lasted 3 hours. There was never flirting. Only honesty. She shared stories about children in her classroom who believed every broken crayon deserved another chance because it could still create beautiful pictures. I shared memories of my parents teaching Everett and me that kindness was the only investment guaranteed to grow. Without realizing it, she became part of my routine. Then one afternoon she asked whether Everett would be comfortable if she visited him. He smiled brighter than I had seen in months. When she arrived carrying homemade soup and terrible hospital crossword puzzles she'd intentionally chosen because she knew he loved complaining about impossible clues, the room somehow felt warmer. Watching them together should have made me happy. Instead it confused me. Because every time she smiled at Everett, a tiny part of me wished she had smiled at me that way. The realization terrified me. She had agreed to meet my brother. Not me. I buried those feelings as deeply as I could. Months passed. Everett slowly recovered enough to return home. His doctors remained cautious, but hope finally returned. One afternoon he asked me a question I wasn't prepared to answer. Did I love her? I denied it immediately. Too quickly. He simply nodded. Then he quietly admitted something I never expected. He liked her. He respected her. He believed she was one of the kindest people he'd ever met. But every conversation they shared somehow drifted toward me. Every funny story she told involved asking how I reacted. Every update she wanted somehow included my name. He wasn't blind. He had noticed long before I had. I insisted he was imagining things. He smiled sadly. Sometimes the people who love us most can see truths we refuse to face ourselves. I avoided Eliza for nearly 3 weeks after that conversation. I answered messages politely but briefly. I convinced myself distance was the honorable choice. Then everything changed. One rainy afternoon Everett called me sounding strangely calm. He asked me to come over. When I arrived, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a printed screenshot. It was a message from Eliza to him. She thanked him for introducing her to the person she never expected to meet. She admitted she had agreed to the blind date hoping to find romance but had accidentally found someone whose quiet compassion made her feel safe. She apologized because she knew the situation was unfair. She didn't want to hurt him. She simply couldn't pretend her heart had chosen differently. I couldn't breathe. Everett watched me read every word. Then he did something that completely shattered me. He hugged me. He whispered that after everything life had taken from both of us, neither of us should lose happiness because of guilt. I cried harder than I had since our parents died. Not because I was happy. Because I felt like I was betraying the man who had sacrificed everything for me. Everett refused to let me carry that burden. He reminded me that love was never something you could assign to the person who deserved it most. It simply happened. Weeks later I finally met Eliza again. Neither of us knew how to begin. Eventually she admitted she almost stopped answering my messages because she believed I regretted ever meeting her. I admitted I had stayed away because loyalty to my brother mattered more than my own feelings. She smiled sadly. Then she revealed something that stunned me. The moment I walked into that cafe apologizing for someone else's absence, she had already realized I possessed something incredibly rare. Most people spend their lives trying to appear impressive. I had arrived trying only to protect someone else's feelings. That single act had told her more about my character than months of perfect conversations ever could. Life didn't magically become easy after that. Everett continued facing health challenges. Eliza and I moved slowly, carefully, always making sure our relationship never came at the expense of the family that had already survived enough pain. There were difficult conversations. Moments of guilt. Days when fear returned stronger than hope. Then came another twist none of us expected. Everett's condition unexpectedly relapsed. This time it was worse. For several terrifying weeks, doctors weren't certain he would recover. The man who had spent his life rescuing everyone suddenly couldn't rescue himself. Watching him fade again nearly broke me. I stopped sleeping. Stopped eating properly. Every future I had imagined with Eliza suddenly felt selfish while my brother fought simply to stay alive. One afternoon she found me sitting alone outside the hospital staring at nothing. Without saying a word, she sat beside me. She didn't offer empty promises. She didn't tell me everything would be okay. She simply held my hand while we watched people come and go. Sometimes love isn't found in the words people speak. Sometimes it's found in the silence they willingly share. Everett survived. Recovery was painfully slow. But he survived. Months later, after completing another exhausting round of treatment, he insisted on joining us for a picnic in the park. Watching him laugh under bright afternoon sunlight while children chased kites across the grass felt almost unreal. He looked older. Thinner. But happier than I had seen him in years. Halfway through lunch he reached into his jacket and placed a small velvet box on the picnic blanket. For one confused second I thought he had lost his mind. Then he laughed so hard he nearly spilled his lemonade. He pushed the box toward me and reminded me that he had terrible taste in jewelry. He had only picked it up because someone needed to stop making excuses. My hands trembled even more than they had outside that cafe. Eliza covered her face before I even opened the box. I asked the simplest question I had ever asked in my life. She answered before I finished speaking. Yes. Years have passed since that unbelievable first meeting. Everett still jokes that he accidentally became the greatest matchmaker in our family's history. His health remains something we never take for granted, but every birthday he celebrates feels like a miracle instead of an expectation. Eliza still teaches children that broken crayons can color beautiful pictures. I still restore furniture most people consider beyond saving. Maybe that's why we understand each other so well. Both of us believe damaged things deserve another chance. Our wedding photographs include one picture I treasure above all the others. It isn't the ceremony. It isn't the first kiss. It's a candid photograph taken just before everything began. Everett is standing between us, smiling with quiet pride while holding both our hands. Whenever people ask how Eliza and I met, they expect some romantic story about fate arranging the perfect blind date. Instead I tell them the truth. The greatest love story of my life began because one brother loved another enough to worry about disappointing a stranger even while lying in a hospital bed. Speech balloon special request: before the story ends, tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in this situation? If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more meaningful and inspiring stories. Your support encourages us to keep creating stories that touch hearts around the world. Life has a remarkable way of introducing the right people through the wrong circumstances. Kindness has a way of opening doors that charm never could. Forgiveness frees hearts that guilt tries to imprison, and real love never grows by taking from others, it grows through sacrifice, honesty, patience, and hope. Sometimes the greatest blessing doesn't arrive the way you planned. Sometimes it walks into your life disguised as disappointment, asks you to trust one more time, and quietly proves that second chances can become the beginning of the most beautiful chapters we will ever live.